With us today is the National Party candidate for the seat of Barker, Jonathan Pietzsch. How are you, Jonathan?
Good, thanks, Wayne. Great to be here.
And Rikki Lambert is with me too. Rikki, the seat of Barker has some significant issues, and particularly the issue of water. And it's the first one we're going to start with. Jonathan, tell us about what the Nationals' policy is in the seat of Barker for water.
Wayne, the South Australian Nationals believe that the Basin Plan does need to be delivered in full. And I must say I did have a laugh at the Stock Journal headline this week where it said that they'd asked 3 National Party politicians about their views on the Basin Plan and got 3 different answers. We think it's quite important that South Australia has a National Party representative in our federal party room to give a South Australian perspective. And we also think that the New South Wales particularly has been dragging the chain on delivering some of the things they need to, and that needs to change.
And Jonathan, you've said on that front before that you're willing to stand up against your National Party colleagues on this front. That's probably why what you're saying. That's why you're getting different answers about this. Is because, like Anne Webster says, there's no way 450 gigalitres will be delivered down the Murray simply because it can't be delivered without having negative social or economic outcomes. Anne Ruston this morning, when I spoke with her, said the Basin Plan, she says, will be delivered on time, like you said. Oh no, according to the plan, but she wouldn't say on time. 2024 is the deadline. Buybacks are the scenario if that doesn't happen. Do you support buybacks happening to get to the 450 gigs?
Look, I'd say I'd support buybacks if it doesn't detrimentally affect communities, and that's really the test. And I think you've just outlined the problem that we, because of some of the other states dragging the chain on some of the reforms they needed to do, we are going to struggle to hit that target. But I think it's very important for South Australia that we do get that water. Okay,
let's head to another very important topic, and it's been the housing policy. The Coalition has put out a policy. As a SA Nationals candidate, do you support the Coalition's policy of the first home buyers being able to use superannuation, 40% of that superannuation for their first home purchase?
Absolutely. We're really excited about this policy, and I look at it and go back to when I was in my early 20s and think about what the decisions I would have made that would have been different as a result. I think this will incentivise people to sacrifice into super. One of the criticisms we've heard in the last few days is that it's potentially eating into somebody's retirement fund, but I just look at this as being essentially a self-managed super fund type arrangement where somebody's able to help themselves in the short term to get into a home and also take the capital growth from that into the super when they sell that house.
Now, that could have an inflationary pressure on house prices, which have already gone up, which is great for a homeowner, someone who has a house, but those that are looking for housing affordability to get into the market. Is it going to spike regional prices as well?
Look, I think we've already seen quite a significant increase. I think with rising interest rates, we'll probably see some downward pressure there as well. But when we've got first homeowners trying to compete against people that have equity, and I know how difficult that is with no equity, it's almost impossible to get anywhere. You might have serviceability, but the bank will not lend you anything. And I think this gives people a leg up that lets them get into that housing market.
What about the policy for the Nationals here for the seat of Barker in the area of health? We've heard a lot said about the lack of rural doctors, the lack of retention of doctors. Do you have a particular view on how we can keep doctors in country towns?
Look, I think it's really important that we start training doctors in country areas. When I was up in the Riverland this week, there's a great program now up there where the local hospital is going to be training 5 doctors a year, or intaking 5 doctors a year. So they'll do 2 years at Flinders and then go and complete their training up there. I think we really need to be looking at those sorts of programs. It's a lot easier to keep somebody in the regions if they're already there, if they've already built the community networks.
So you want a unity ticket in a sense with Tony Passon on that front. They're talking up rural training, but he's described Rowan Ramsey's idea as a nuclear option where you use their Medicare provider number to force a medical graduate or doctor to work in a particular regional area. Do we need to be looking at that? Because as Mark Bray's told me just now in an interview with the Labor candidate, this has been a problem for decades and the next government needs to fix it.
Look, I probably wouldn't go as far as Rowan on that, but I think there's an issue too with doctors going into specialist fields. We really need to focus on trying to get more GPs as well. So one of the things that the National Party Federal is looking at is making at least 1 year of training for all doctors to be a GP in a country area.
Okay, then the issue of roads. The member for Barker, Tony Passon, says that he's going to be out there proclaiming for a duplication of the Sturt Highway and duplication of the Dukes Highway and roads and bridges, a bridge over the River Murray at Lirrup and so forth. What is your position on the building of infrastructure in the seat of Barker?
Look, we might be on a unity ticket there as well. I think the Duke's Highway particularly does need to be duplicated, and it does need to be duplicated urgently. We need a much greater focus on some of the arterial roads, particularly in Barker. They're not up to spec. They're not up to the trucks that are going over them, and that funding needs to be allocated.
But Tony Passon talks about these as now he feels he's got enough political capital as a Liberal who's been there for 5 terms? I forget. He's got enough political capital to talk about these blue sky projects. Why are we only hearing about this sort of progress and, right through to the border? He's talking about duplicating Sturt Highway right through to the border, going over Springcart Gully near Renmark. Why has this not had progress so far?
Look, I'd say this is where the Nationals interstate, you can see the real delivery on arterial roads and critical infrastructure. And that's one of the reasons I'd say you need a National Party MP here to fight for those sorts of things.
Okay, on the issues surrounding agriculture, we've heard very little in this campaign about it. The New South Wales farmers have said that neither the Coalition or Labor had put forward a significant biosecurity plan for Australia. Do you differ from the Coalition in what they've done in biosecurity, particularly given foot and mouth disease?
Look, we had a great chat with David Littleproud when he was down campaigning with us last week about this. That's been one of his primary focuses, is on making sure that biosecurity is funded and given a priority within the Agriculture Department.
But this is where James Jackson, the New South Wales Farmers President, has said, and others have been saying for some time, we need a levy on containers that are coming into the country, a levy on imports, so there's a recurrent fund to provide for biosecurity. The Shooters candidate in the Senate for the Senate in New South Wales, who keeps bees, said there's a risk to the bee industry from the bees inside the shipping containers. So it's not an abstract concept. Even the containers themselves are a biosecurity threat. Do we need that kind of levy?
No, I don't think we need that levy. We do need the funding allocated, but I don't think putting a levy potentially on producers is a great way to go forward. And
but this is a levy on imports.
Yeah, but that'll flow through to producers who are already paying for these things elsewhere.
All right, let's have a look then at live sheep. We've had the Labor Party out of their policy bring this issue up, and then they've jumped backwards and forwards about it. How do you see the export of both live exports from Australia and also our chilled beef and sheep exports?
I was very, very disappointed to see that come from the Labor Party. We would have hoped that the lessons were learnt the last time round that something like this was proposed. For Australian producers, live exports are critical. They have to be done humanely. There's no argument about that, and I think we've seen some great strides in securing that chain the whole way through to ensure that those animals are handled properly. But there is a market that we sell to that will not accept a chilled product, and I do not see why there is a need to try to block that.
So, Jonathan, let's talk about policy that surrounds the human capital, people. The Coalition obviously has put a number of mechanisms in place through COVID-19, but pensioners are people that have seemed to have suffered, and many of them still want to work and earn an income, but they seem to be blocked from doing so. What is the policy for you as the Nationals candidate in the seat of Barker?
Yeah, so Wayne, something that the South Australian Nationals have put forward that we think is really important in this campaign is the ability to get pensioners to work for longer periods of time without it affecting their pension. At the moment, a pensioner can work roughly a day and a half a week before it negatively affects their pension to the tune of 50 cents in the dollar. So once you factor tax in, they're essentially going to work for 30 cents out of every dollar they earn. We think it's a really simple solution to increase the amount of time they can work. This will also help fill the short-term labour force issues in regional Australia when we've got harvest periods and windows that potentially run to 10, 12 weeks, which enables a pensioner to go to work and then, if they're grey nomads, to hit the road again or spend time with their grandchildren, but also gives them a bit more security in their retirement.
But to be clear, this is something you want in place, not just as a short-term thing while there's labour shortages when we haven't been able to bring migrant workers in, as something as a permanent setting, so those pensioners that want to work can earn a day or two's earnings to help contribute on the farm, for instance.
Absolutely. I think we've got two different issues in labour. We've got the structural long-term issues in regional Australia, which the ag visa will hopefully go some ways towards fixing. But we've also got these short-term windows, which historically have been filled by backpackers. But if we've got an opportunity to give our pensioners a leg up in that regard, wouldn't we rather do that for them? And I think long-term, it's a great solution.
It's been good to speak with the candidate for Barker from the National Party. It's going to be a very significant election. Jonathan Pietzsch, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.